Welcome to the chilling world of one of the most baffling unsolved mysteries of the 1990s, the Jigsaw Murders. Imagine a series of gruesome crimes, each more horrifying than the last, all connected by a single haunting signature, a puzzle piece left at the scene. This was the calling card of the elusive Jigsaw Killer, a name that still sends shivers down the spine of many in England. The Jigsaw Murders began in the early 1990s, a time when the United Kingdom was already grappling with its share of challenges. Against this backdrop, a series of brutal killings emerged, each victim found in a macabre tableau that defied explanation. The killer's modus operandi was as mysterious as it was terrifying. With each body, a single jigsaw piece was left behind, a grim token that seemed to mock the investigators who were always one step behind. This is the story of those dark days, of the relentless hunt for a killer who seemed to be playing a twisted game, a game where every move was calculated, every piece meticulously placed, and every puzzle left unsolved. Our story truly begins on a foggy November morning in 1992, in the quiet town of Brighton. The first victim was discovered by a jogger in an alleyway behind a row of dilapidated buildings. The victim, a middle-aged man, was found in a gruesome state, his body arranged in a grotesque display that defied immediate comprehension. His limbs were contorted in unnatural angles, and his face bore an expression of sheer terror, frozen in his final moments. Around him, the ground was littered with various objects: a broken mirror, a string of beads, and a single blood-stained jigsaw piece. The scene was a macabre puzzle in itself, each item seemingly placed with deliberate intent. The jigsaw piece, however, was the most chilling element. It was a small, irregular piece of cardboard, about an inch in size, with a distinctive pattern on one side. The piece was dark red, almost the color of dried blood, and bore a faint, almost indiscernible engraving of a number. The number 1. This was the first clue in what would become a series of cryptic messages left by the Jigsaw Killer. Investigators were initially puzzled by the significance of the jigsaw piece. Was it a taunt, a clue, or part of a larger, more sinister game? As the investigation progressed, it became clear that this was no ordinary killer. The jigsaw piece was a calling card, a signature that would haunt the detectives for years to come. With the discovery of this first crime, the chilling game had begun. The Jigsaw Killer had made his move, and the investigators were now players in a deadly puzzle, racing against time to decipher the clues before more lives were lost. The significance of the jigsaw piece would only become clearer as more victims surfaced, each piece adding to the growing enigma. As the fog of Brighton's first chilling murder began to lift, the shadows only grew darker. The Jigsaw Killer struck again and again, each crime more horrific than the last. Let's take a closer look at the sequence of these gruesome events. The second victim was discovered 3 weeks later, in a deserted park on the outskirts of town. A young woman, her body posed with meticulous precision. Her hands were clasped together as if in prayer, and beside her lay a small blood-stained jigsaw piece, marked with the number 2. This time, the piece was part of a larger picture, a hint that the killer's puzzle was growing more complex. Next, a retired school teacher was found in his own home, a place that should have been a sanctuary. His body was positioned in front of a shattered window, the shards of glass glinting ominously around him. Clutched in his lifeless hand was another piece of the puzzle, the number 3, etched clearly onto its surface. The killer's message was becoming unmistakable. Each victim was a pawn in a deadly game, each piece a step closer to understanding his twisted mind. Then, a local shop owner was discovered in the basement of his store. His body was surrounded by scattered merchandise, a grotesque tableau that spoke of a final, desperate struggle. Among the chaos, another jigsaw piece, this one bearing the number 4, lay in plain sight. The investigators were beginning to see a pattern, a chilling connection between the victims. Each one seemed to be chosen for a specific reason, their lives interwoven in ways that were not immediately apparent. The final victim in the series was a young artist, found in her studio. Her death was particularly brutal, her body arranged amidst her own unfinished works. The jigsaw piece, marked with the number 5, was embedded in a canvas, a haunting final touch to her last creation. The killer's puzzle was nearly complete, but the investigators were still struggling to piece together the full picture. Patterns began to emerge as the detectives delved deeper into the victims' lives. Each had crossed paths with the others at some point, their fates seemingly intertwined by the invisible hand of the Jigsaw Killer. The jigsaw pieces, when placed together, began to form a larger image, a map of the killer's mind and his twisted sense of justice. The connections between the victims hinted at a deeper motive, a vendetta that spanned years. The Jigsaw Killer was not just a murderer, he was a master manipulator, weaving a complex web that ensnared his victims and left the investigators perpetually one step behind. As the puzzle pieces fell into place, the full horror of the Jigsaw Killer's plan began to emerge. What drove this man to such extremes? What was the final piece of his macabre puzzle? As the Jigsaw Killer's reign of terror continued, the police and forensic teams were thrust into a relentless and harrowing investigation. The initial response to each murder scene was methodical, yet tinged with an underlying sense of urgency. Crime scene tape cordoned off the areas, casting a stark contrast against the grisly tableau that lay within. Officers meticulously combed through every inch of the scenes, while forensic experts collected samples and documented the chilling evidence left behind. Despite their best efforts, the challenges in solving the case were monumental. The Jigsaw Killer was a master of concealment, leaving behind just enough clues to taunt the investigators, but never enough to reveal his identity. Each crime scene was meticulously cleaned, with only the jigsaw pieces and the victims' bodies providing any semblance of a lead. The lack of fingerprints, DNA, or any other tangible evidence left the police in a constant state of frustration and despair. The difficulties didn't end there. The killer's choice of victims seemed random at first, but as the investigation deepened, a pattern began to emerge. This realization brought forth a slew of new challenges, as detectives had to delve into the victims' pasts, uncovering connections that were not immediately apparent. Each new piece of information only added to the complexity of the case, turning it into a labyrinthine puzzle that seemed impossible to solve. Throughout the investigation, several notable suspects and theories emerged. Some believed the killer was a disgruntled former police officer, using his knowledge of forensic procedures to stay one step ahead. Others speculated that the murders were the work of a deranged artist, obsessed with creating a macabre masterpiece. Each theory was meticulously explored, but none provided the breakthrough the investigators so desperately needed. As the investigation dragged on, the pressure mounted. The media hounded the police for updates, while the public grew increasingly anxious and fearful. The Jigsaw Killer's shadow loomed large over the city, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked in the darkness. Despite the hardships, the investigators pressed on, driven by a relentless determination to bring the killer to justice. What would it take to finally unmask the Jigsaw Killer? The answer remained elusive, just out of reach, like the final piece of a twisted puzzle. As the investigation continued, forensic psychologists were brought in to create a psychological profile of the Jigsaw Killer. This was no ordinary murderer. The meticulous nature of the crime suggested a highly intelligent and methodical individual. The killer's behavior indicated a deep understanding of human psychology, using fear and manipulation as tools to control both victims and investigators. The evidence pointed to someone who found a twisted sense of satisfaction in orchestrating these gruesome scenarios. The jigsaw puzzle pieces left at each crime scene weren't just random tokens. They were a calculated message. Each piece symbolized the killer's perceived control over the victims' lives, as if they were mere parts of a grander design. Psychologists theorized that the Jigsaw Killer might have experienced significant trauma or loss, driving them to seek a form of catharsis through these macabre acts. The selection of victims, initially appearing random, began to reveal a pattern of individuals who had wronged others or themselves in some way. It seemed the killer believed they were delivering a twisted form of justice. Delving deeper into the possible motivations, experts speculated that the killer saw the jigsaw puzzles as a metaphor for life itself, complex, fragmented, and often impossible to fully understand. By forcing the victims and investigators to confront these puzzles, The killer was imposing their own dark philosophy onto the world. But what could drive someone to such lengths? Was it a desire for power, a need to instill fear, or a quest for some form of twisted redemption? The answers remained elusive, much like the killer themselves. As the psychological profile began to take shape, it became clear that understanding the mind behind the murders was as crucial as uncovering the physical evidence. This deep dive into the killer's psyche added another layer of complexity to an already confounding case, making the hunt for the Jigsaw Killer even more urgent and desperate. As the investigation into the Jigsaw Killer progressed, a multitude of theories began to emerge. Experts, amateur sleuths, and internet forums buzzed with speculation about the true identity and motives of this elusive murderer. One prominent theory suggested that the Jigsaw Killer was a disgruntled former law enforcement officer, using their insider knowledge to evade capture and taunt their former colleagues. This theory gained traction due to the killer's apparent understanding of police procedures and forensic science. Another theory posited that the killer was a medical professional, perhaps a surgeon or psychiatrist, who had suffered a personal tragedy. The precise nature of the murders and the psychological games played with the victims seemed to support this idea. Could the Jigsaw Killer be seeking some twisted form of psychological revenge? There were also those who believed the Jigsaw Killer wasn't a lone wolf, but part of a larger, secretive organization. This theory was fueled by the complexity and resources required to carry out the murders, leading some to speculate about a cult-like group dedicated to enacting their own brand of justice. The media frenzy surrounding the case was unprecedented. News outlets provided round-the-clock coverage, and the public was both horrified and fascinated by the gruesome details. The killer's cryptic messages and jigsaw puzzle pieces became iconic, fueling a macabre fascination. Social media platforms became hotbeds of discussion, with hashtags related to the Jigsaw Killer trending regularly. True crime enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists alike dissected every piece of available information, often leading to wild speculations and false leads. Books, documentaries, and podcasts dedicated to the case proliferated, each offering their own take on the mystery. The Jigsaw Killer became a cultural phenomenon, a dark figure that captured the collective imagination and sparked endless debates. Despite the many theories and the intense public interest, the true identity and motives of the Jigsaw Killer remained shrouded in mystery. The case was a chilling reminder of the depths of human depravity and the enduring allure of unsolved mysteries. Despite the passage of time, the investigation into the Jigsaw Killer remains active. Law enforcement agencies continue to pour resources into solving this complex case. Recent developments have included the discovery of new evidence and the use of advanced forensic technologies. Cold case units have re-examined old clues, hoping to find that one critical piece of the puzzle that could finally lead to an arrest. However, the Jigsaw Killer's meticulous planning and ability to cover their tracks have made the investigation incredibly challenging. Many questions about the Jigsaw Killer remain unanswered. Who exactly is this elusive murderer? What drives them to commit such heinous acts? And how have they managed to evade capture for so long? These unresolved aspects keep the case alive in the public's mind, fueling ongoing interest and speculation. The cryptic messages and jigsaw puzzle pieces left at crime scenes continue to baffle investigators and armchair detectives alike. The case's complexity and the killer's apparent mastery of psychological manipulation make it one of the most intriguing unsolved mysteries of our time. As we reflect on the Jigsaw Killer case, the key points stand out vividly. The meticulous planning, the cryptic clues, the psychological manipulation, and the sheer elusiveness of the murderer have baffled investigators and the public alike. From the first crime to the subsequent murders, each act was a piece of a larger, more sinister puzzle. The ongoing investigation, with its recent developments and advanced forensic technologies, continues to seek answers to this chilling mystery. The impact of the Jigsaw Killer case extends beyond the realm of crime. It reveals the complexities of criminal investigations and the depths of human psychology. The killer's ability to manipulate and control, to leave investigators and the public in a state of perpetual uncertainty, showcases a dark side of human nature. This case forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the lengths to which individuals can go to fulfill their twisted desires. As we close this chapter, we pose some questions to you. What drives such a meticulous and calculating mind? How can society better understand and prevent such heinous acts? And, perhaps most hauntingly, could the Jigsaw Killer still be out there? Watching? Waiting? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and stay tuned as we continue to explore more chilling mysteries.